ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकय चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामीनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. Reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto-3, Chapter 27, Understanding Material Nature. So, very beautiful section where Kapila Muni is again coming back to description of devotional service. Just look at the last three translations, how beautifully they are going. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, this is text 21, Sri Bhagavan Vacha. One can get liberation by seriously discharging devotional service unto me, and thereby hearing for a long time about me or from me. By this execution of one's prescribed duties, there will be no reaction and one will be freed from the contamination of matter. This devotional service has to be performed strongly in perfect knowledge and with transcendental vision. One must be strongly renounced and must engage in austerity and perform mystic yoga in order to be firmly fixed in self-absorption. Atma Samadhina. The influence of material nature has covered the living entity, and thus it is as if the living entity were always in a blazing fire. But by the process of seriously discharging devotional service, this influence can be removed, just as wooden sticks, which cause a fire, are themselves consumed by it. So, although the living entity is covered by senses or matter, this matter can be utilized in such a way which will consume the gross body and the subtle body and dissolve the gross body and subtle body. Text 24. By discovering the faultiness of his desiring to lord it over material nature and thereby giving it up, the living entity becomes independent and stands in his own glory. Bhukta bhoga parityakva drishta dosha cha nityashah nishvaryasya shubham dhatte sve mahimni sthitasya cha. So very, very beautiful section which is ongoing currently. Now we come to text 25. Just a minute. So text 25. यथा हि अप्रतिबुद्ध्यस्य प्रस्वापो बहुअनर्थभृत् स एवाय प्रतिबुद्धस्य न वै मोहाय कल्पते. Translation.
In the dreaming state, one's consciousness is almost covered, and one sees many inauspicious things. But when he is awakened and fully conscious, such inauspicious things cannot bewilder him. Purport. In the condition of dreaming, when one's consciousness is almost covered, one may see many unfavorable things which cause disturbances or anxiety. But upon awakening, although he remembers what happened in the dream, he is not disturbed. Similarly, the position of self realization or understanding of one's real relationship with the Supreme Lord makes one completely satisfied and the three modes of material nature, which are the cause of all disturbances, cannot affect him. In contaminated consciousness, one sees everything to be for his own enjoyment. But in pure consciousness or Krishna consciousness, he sees that everything exists for the enjoyment of the supreme enjoyer. That is the difference between the dream state and wakefulness. The state of contaminated consciousness is compared to dream consciousness, and Krishna consciousness is compared to awakened stage of life. Actually, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, the only absolute enjoyer is Krishna. One who can understand that Krishna is the proprietor of all the three worlds and that he is the friend of everyone is peaceful and independent. As long as a conditioned soul does not have this knowledge, he wants to be the enjoyer of everything. He wants to become a humanitarian or philanthropist and open hospitals and schools for his fellow human beings. This is all illusion, for one cannot benefit anyone by such material activities. If one wishes to benefit his fellow brother, he must awaken his dormant Krishna consciousness. The Krishna conscious position is that of Pratibuddha, which means pure consciousness. Hare Krishna.
Now, Kapila Muni says, in the dreaming state, one's consciousness is almost covered, and thus he will see many inauspicious things. And when he is awakened and fully conscious, the inauspicious things cannot bewilder him. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains how that in the stage of dreaming, one's consciousness is covered, and in the covered consciousness, one will see so many different varieties of dreams. Right? I know some devotees who will get dreams of their 10th standard English exam, and they have not prepared absolutely, panicking, and then they will wake up and realize, oh my God, everything is over now. So the dreaming state, the consciousness is covered. Similarly, the living entity in the conditioned state is dreaming the material existence. He is in the material existence, but his pure Krishna consciousness or pure consciousness is covered over by these three modes of material nature. And thus, there are so many inauspicious things he will see around. Right? Prabhupada in Science of Self-Realization, he talks about daydream and night dream. Right? Day and night dreaming. And very beautiful discussion there Prabhupada has. How the night dream lasts for only a couple of hours and daydream for a living entity lasts for a lifetime. And he will be bewildered in so many different ways. But when one awakens to pure Krishna consciousness, then what happens? Then the daydream, he treats it like a dream. That means he's responsible in his activities, but he's not highly affected by those activities. Right? And this is, and Prabhupada says, the real dream, the real stage is to understand the position of the Supreme Lord. Just like when we are in the darkness, when we come in the sunlight, first thing is we understand the position of the sun. So position of the Supreme Lord is Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. Suridham Sarvabhutanam Gyatva Shanti Mrichati. That he is the Bhoktaram, he is the master of all three worlds. Yagya Tapasam, and for Yagya Tapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suridham, and he is the ultimate friend to everyone. And when with this consciousness, the burden of helping everyone, the burden of enjoyment is removed from the living entity. Right? He sees everything in pure consciousness, and thus he is properly situated. Of course, understanding this is dreaming or understanding Krishna is the only, that doesn't mean that living entity becomes inactive. Again, we have many times discussed. Paradigm of Bhagavatam stands on the paradigm of Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita very clearly says, Nahi kaschit kshanamapi jatu tishtanti akarmakrit. That the living entity can never remain, at rest. He's a very, very restless moment to moment. He is always in one or another guna. So the sum total is one has to purify one's activities. Right? And with such purified activities, Prabhupada says, is called as Pratibuddha, and that is pure consciousness. Text 26. Evam vidita tattvasya prakritirmai manasam yunjato napakuruta atmaramasya karihchit.
Translation: The influence of material nature cannot harm an enlightened soul, even though he engages in material activities, because he knows the truth of the Absolute and his mind is fixed on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. Lord Kapila says that Mai Manasam, a devotee whose mind is always fixed upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is called Atmarama or Vidita Tattva. Atmarama means one who rejoices in the self or one who enjoys in the spiritual atmosphere. Atma, in the material sense, means the body or the mind, but when referring to one whose mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, Atmarama means one who is fixed in spiritual activities in relationship with the Supreme Soul. The Supreme Soul is the personality of Godhead, and the individual soul is the living entity. When they engage in reciprocation of service and benediction, the living entity is said to be in the Atmarama position. This Atmarama position can be attained by one who knows the truth as it is. The truth is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the enjoyer and that the living entities are meant for his service and enjoyment. One who knows this truth and one who tries to engage all resources in the service of the Lord escapes all material reactions and influences of the modes of material nature. An example may be cited in this connection. Just as a materialist engages in constructing a big skyscraper, a devotee engages in constructing a big temple for Vishnu. Superficially, the skyscraper constructor and temple constructor are on the same level, for both are collecting wood, stone, iron, and other building materials. But the person who constructs a skyscraper is a materialist, and the person who constructs a temple of Vishnu is Atmarama. The materialist tries to satisfy himself in relation to his body by constructing a skyscraper, but the devotee tries to satisfy the super self, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by constructing the temple. Although both are engaged in association of material activities, the devotee is liberated and the materialist is conditioned. This is because the devotee who is constructing the temple has fixed his mind upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but the non-devotee who is constructing the skyscraper has his mind fixed in sense gratification. If, while performing any activity, even in material existence, one's mind is fixed upon the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, one will not be entangled or conditioned. The worker in devotional service, in full Krishna consciousness, is always independent of the influence of material nature. Hare Krishna.
Next, now, Kardama Muni says, influence of material nature cannot harm an enlightened soul, even though he engages in the material activities. Why? Because he knows the truth, the absolute truth, and his mind is fixed on the Supreme Lord. So, although the material nature is very fierce, but the enlightened soul will not be harmed by the material nature. It's very similar to one of the previous verse where Kapila Muni says, simply in the material thing doesn't make one contaminated. And Prabhupada gives the example of the police department. That simply because one is in the police or connected with some activity of police doesn't make one criminal. Unless one engages in the activities of the three modes of material nature, there is no contamination for the living entity. And therefore, it is also said that, when the living entity comes down first, the living entity takes a very high position like Brahma or one of the top demigods. And one can actually conduct one's activity and from there can go back if one is not entangled by the three modes of material nature. And the same theme is continuing here. Prabhupada explains in the purport, Mai Manasa means a devotee whose mind is always fixed on the Supreme Lord. Such a personality is called as Atma Rama or Vidita Tattva. Evam Vidita Tattvasya Prakrutir Mai Manasam. Very beautiful verse. Yunjato napakurvatah Atma Ramasya Karhichit. Very nice verse this is. So who is Atmaram? So there is a famous Atmaram verse in Bhagavatam. Atmaramascha munayo nirgrantha api gurukrame. Kurvanti ahaitu kim bhaktim ityam bhuta guno harihi. That such a personality who has fixed in spiritual activities, his vision is fixed, is called as Atmaram. Such a personality may be engaged in so-called material activity, but he is never entangled. And this was precisely question of Arjun, and this was precisely Lord's answer, saying, my dear Arjuna, although you may be engaged in a very ghastly warfare, but because your mind is fixed on me, right? And therefore, you will be never contaminated by the material reactions of this activity. Srila Prabhupada gives another example here, that somebody is building a huge skyscraper building and somebody is building a temple. Now, most of the activities are same. So, everybody is going to need some brick, cement, sand is required, water is required. You have to deal with the construction worker. Construction workers will have their own problems. Somebody must be eating tobacco, somebody must be eating tobacco, somebody must be smoking, this, that. So all the anxiety, all the paraphernalia and the anxiety while constructing a temple and constructing a skyscraper, they are almost on the same level. But while one is constructing the temple, one is getting liberated. While otherwise, one is constructing the material paraphernalia for one's own enjoyment, is getting bound up in the reaction. Activity is same, anxiety is same, result is different. This we will see very classically in the Samudra Manthan Leela. And there is one very beautiful verse comes that time, that between the Lord, between the Devata and the demons, almost everything was same. The kala was same, the instruments were same, the place was same, the endeavor was same, the intention was same, even. But the Supreme Lord was, so there is a very beautiful verse there. Later we'll see that. So such a personality, because he's focused his attention on the Supreme Lord, he is liberated, although one is engaged in the material activities. And this is how Arjuna is being solaced, that, my dear Arjuna, Lord says, although you are engaged in this warfare, you are not bound by the results of the warfare. Padma Patra Ivambasa. Text 27. So last three verses, what the major theme was? The major theme was that although material nature is so strong, one who is a liberated personality, Prakriti cannot harm the enlightened soul. So this was the theme, 24, 25, 26. So last three verses, this is the final liberation of yogi. Text 27. Yadevamaadhyatmaratah kalena bahujanmana sarvatra jata vairagya abrahma bhuvanat munihi. Translation.
When a person thus engages in devotional service and self-realization for many, many years and births, he becomes completely reluctant to enjoy any one of the material planets, even up to the highest planet, which is known as Brahmaloka. He becomes fully developed in consciousness. Purport. Anyone engaged in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as a devotee, but there is a distinction between pure devotees and mixed devotees. A mixed devotee engages in devotional service for the spiritual benefit of being eternally engaged in the transcendental abode of the Lord, in full bliss and knowledge. In material existence, when a devotee is not completely purified, he expects material benefit from the Lord in the form of relief from material miseries, or he wants material gain, advancement in knowledge of the relationship between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and a living entity, or knowledge as to the real nature of the Supreme Lord. When a person is transcendental to these conditions, he is called pure devotee. He does not engage himself in the service of the Lord for any material benefit or for understanding of the Supreme Lord. His one interest is that he loves the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he spontaneously engages in satisfying him. The highest example of devotional service is that of the gopis in Vrindavana. They are not interested in understanding Krishna, but only in loving him. That platform of love is the pure state of devotional service. Unless one is advanced in this pure state of devotional service, there is a tendency to desire elevation to a higher material position. A mixed devotee may desire to enjoy a comfortable life on another planet with a greater span of life, such as on Brahmaloka. These are material desires, but because a mixed devotee engages in the service of the Lord, ultimately, after many, many lives of material enjoyment, he undoubtedly develops Krishna consciousness, and a symptom of this Krishna consciousness is that he is no longer interested in any sort of materially elevated life. He does not even aspire to become a personality like Lord Brahma.
So this text 27. When a person thus engages in devotional service for many, many years in one life, and births, in case one is not correct, course corrects oneself, then he becomes completely reluctant to enjoy any of these material planets, even up to Brahma, and thus his consciousness is fully developed. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says there is a distinction between pure devotee and mixed devotee. Pure devotee will engage in spiritual activity for the pure satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, and there is no other desire. There is no desire for puja, labh, pratishtha. Sometimes, or there is no desire to get rid of the material miseries as well. Right? And this consciousness one has to develop within this lifetime. That my Lord, maybe I became devotee for a reason, or became devotee out of Artho Jidnyasura Artharthi Gyani Cha Bharatarshapa. Out of something I started, but now let me advance on the pure path of simply loving the Supreme Lord and not about any material achievements. And this is where otherwise, because of the material experience, a devotee also may aspire so many things. Material existence is filled with janma, mrityu, jara, vyadhi. One just wants to get rid of all these problems. One wants to get rid of, the daily kind of a cut that we have in our life. And these are the actually symptoms of desiring of a moksha. But this is not perfectly pure devotional service. What is the definition of pure devotional service? Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadhi anavritam. Sometimes, somebody just want to become so frustrated and disgusted that one wants to just quit the existence only, just want to become Brahmaleen. So these are all the allurements on the path of pure devotional service. But a devotee will engage himself only for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. Srila Prabhupada says the ideal example for this are the gopis. Gopis, they were worshipping Krishna not because he was the Supreme Lord, by the way. Gopis were worshipping Krishna because they loved Krishna. So when I was a new devotee, that I always had this question. I distinctly remember asking this question. If Krishna is not God, why gopis loved Krishna? And then when other devotee was answering me, and then he said, no, it will take some time for you to understand. Why to love Krishna? How gopis loved Krishna, although they were not knowing that he is the Supreme Lord. Or at times, they were covered over by the spiritual ecstasies, and they simply loved Krishna out of loving Krishna. Right? So these are the symptoms of pure devotees. Otherwise, one's path will be distracted and one will become some demigod on some planet and some other planet. And one may enjoy material life, but again one is material atmosphere, and again one is in the path of Janma Mrityu Jaravadi, Abrahma Bhuvana Loka. So, and therefore devotee should aspire only for pure devotional service, at least theoretically. Right? This is very important. And whenever one is even praying for the material result or material activity, one should always say, my dear Lord, although this is not a very pure prayer, although this is not a very pure devotional service, but please kindly accept me. For me, who is other person than you? And that's how Draupadi's prayer for protection from the Supreme Lord is also part of pure devotional service. Because for a devotee, there is no other shelter than the Supreme Lord. And therefore, devotee taking shelter of the Supreme Lord in material misery is also part of pure devotional service, like Gajendra or Draupadi. Correct. So this is how devotee conducts his life. Text 28 and 29. Mad bhakta pratibudhyartho mat prasadena bhuyasa nishreyasam swasamsthanam kaivalyakhyam madashrayam प्राप्नोति हंज साधीरा स्वदृश्या छिन्न संशया यद्गत्वाद निवर्तेत योगी लिंगात् विनिर्गमे. Translation.
Translation. My devotee actually becomes self-realized by my unlimited causeless mercy, and thus, when freed from all doubts, he steadily progresses towards his destined abode, which is directly under the protection of my spiritual energy, the unadulterated bliss. That is the ultimate perfectional goal of the living entity. After giving up the present material body, the mystic devotee goes to that transcendental abode and never comes back. Purport: Actual self-realization means becoming a pure devotee of the Lord. The existence of a devotee implies the function of devotion and the object of devotion. Self-realization ultimately means to understand the personality of Godhead and the living entities, to know the individual self, and the reciprocal exchanges of loving service between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity is real self-realization. This cannot be attained by the impersonalist or other transcendentalists. They cannot understand the science of devotional service. Devotional service is revealed to the pure devotee by the unlimited causeless mercy of the Lord. And this is especially spoken of here by the Lord. Mat prasadena, by my special grace. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Only those who engage in devotional service with love and faith receive the necessary intelligence from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that gradually and progressively they can advance to the abode of the Personality of Godhead. Nishreyasa means the ultimate destination. Swamam Sthana indicates that the impersonalists have no particular place to stay. The impersonalists sacrifice their individuality so that the living spark can merge into the impersonal effulgence emanating from the transcendental body of the Lord. But the devotee has
it's a big purport. We'll read in section. Now Kapila Muni says, my devotee actually becomes self-realized by my unlimited causeless mercy. Mat prasadena. Thus, freed from all doubt, asamshayah, nishreyasah. Then he chinna samshayah, right? He steadily progresses towards his destined abode. And what is the destined abode of Vaikuntha, which is protected by my spiritual energy? This is the ultimate perfectional goal of the living entity. And after giving up this body, he will enter the transcendental abode, and which is nirgame, that is vinirgame, and will never come back. Yad gatvana nivartante. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that devotional service means three things: bhakti, bhakta, and bhagavan. So there is the bhagavan, then there is a bhakta who maintains the individuality, and the eternal relationship between them, that is called as devotional service. And when one is engaged in devotional service, then naturally one attracts, causeless, unlimited causeless mercy of the Supreme Lord. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami. Here one can see mat prasadat dadami bhakti-yogam tam yena mam upayantite. So as soon as one becomes a devotee, the Supreme Lord awards him lots of the causeless mercy. Mat prasadena. By the very special grace of the Supreme Lord, one will become advanced on this path of devotional service. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everybody. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare
Thank you,
Hare
everyone.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Prabhupada.
Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.